Personal credit is based upon the assumption that the total value of a debtor's property is adequate to cover his debt regardless of the changing composition of his property. Only when the total value of an individual's property has been appraised in terms of money will he have permanent credit. Otherwise, credit depends on the changing character of his property. Even in the 18th century, most debts were expressed as specific quantities of specific coins, and this seems to be a stage of transition to the present time. The concept of abstract value detached from any specific form, value that is no longer guaranteed by an objective quality but only by the state or the individual person, was not yet wholly effective. The transition to money's general functional character. The main point, however, is that the significance of metal in monetary affairs recedes more and more into the background, as compared with safeguarding the functional value of money through community institutions. For metal is originally always private property, and public interests and public forces can never gain absolute control over it. One might say that money becomes increasingly a public institution in the strict sense of the word. It consists more and more of what public authorities, public institutions, and the various forms of intercourse and guarantees of the general public make of money, and the extent to which they legitimize it. It is significant, therefore, that in earlier periods money could not yet be based only on its abstract function. Money transactions were tied either to specific enterprises, to the technical production of coins, or to the trade in precious metals. At the beginning of the 13th century, the regular business of exchange was carried out in Vienna by the cloth dyer, in England, and to some extent also in Germany, by the goldsmith. The exchange of coins, which was the core of money transactions in the Middle Ages, because payments everywhere had to be made in local coins, was originally the privilege of the mint itself, of the Munzer Hostnossen. Only later, when the towns acquired the right of coinage, did the business of exchange and the trade in precious metals become separated from the mint. The function of a coin is originally bound to its material in what is almost a personal union, but when a public authority guarantees its value, it acquires independence and exchange, and trade in the material from which it is made becomes open to everybody, precisely to the extent that its function as money is assured by the collectivity. The growing depersonalization of money and its closer relationship to a centralized and more extensive community are directly and effectively connected with the accentuation of those functions that are independent of the metallic value. The value of money is based on a guarantee represented by the central political power, which eventually replaces the significance of the metal. There is here an analogy with a neglected aspect of valuation. When the value of an object is due to the fact that it makes possible the acquisition of another object, its value is then determined by two factors: the intrinsic value of the object to be acquired, and the degree of certainty that it can acquire that object. A diminution in one of these factors may leave the total value unaffected, within certain limits, if it is accompanied by an augmentation of the other factor. Thus, for example, the significance of one of our perceptions depends both upon its reliability and upon the importance of what is perceived. In the natural sciences, the factor of reliability tends to be more important; in the social sciences, the significance of the object perceived, and thus there may be equality in the value of perceptions in these two fields. Only if we follow Aristotle in not doubting the certainty of knowledge, can the value of perception be regarded as depending solely upon the value of the object. The value of a lottery ticket is a product of the probability that it will be drawn and of the size of the possible prize. The value of an action is a product of the probability that its purpose will be accomplished and of the importance of this purpose. The value of a bond is composed of the security of the capital and the rate of interest. Money does not function in exactly the same way, for its growing reliability is not associated with a declining value of the object that it can acquire. But the analogy is still valid insofar as the growing certainty that coin will be accepted at its face value makes possible a diminution in the intrinsic value of the metal content without altering the total value. On the other hand, the causes as well as the effects of the sociological position of money bring about a situation in which the relations between the central power of the group and its individual elements become stronger and closer because the relations among these elements themselves are now channeled through the central power. The Carolingian rulers plainly attempted to replace barter and the exchange of cattle by a money economy. They frequently decreed that coins were not to be rejected, and they punished rejection severely. Coinage was exclusively a royal privilege, and the enforcement of money transactions meant an extension of the royal power into areas in which private and personal modes of exchange had previously existed. In the same way, the Roman gold and silver coins after the time of Augustus were minted exclusively in the name and at the command of the emperor, while the right to issue small coins was assigned to the Senate and to local authorities. It is only a generalization of the same trend that great princes often created powerful coinage systems, as did Darius I, Alexander the Great, Augustus, Diocletian, and others down to Napoleon I. The whole technique which supports a great social power in a barter economy encourages self-sufficiency and the creation of a state within the state, as happened with the large territorial domains from the time of the Merovingians, whereas the equivalent power institutions in a monetary economy have developed and persisted in alliance with the state organization. The modern centralized state, therefore, came into being partly as a result of the prodigious growth of the money economy which followed the opening up of the gold and silver resources of America. The self-sufficiency of feudalism was destroyed by the fact that every transaction depended upon the use of coins, involving a central power and extending the relationships of the contracting parties beyond the coinage itself, with the result that the power of money to bind the individual more closely to the crown came to be regarded as the deeper meaning of the mercantilist system. The fact that the territorial rulers wrested this means of centralization from the German emperors is considered one of the essential reasons for the breakdown of the German Empire. The French and English kings of the 13th and 14th centuries, on the other hand, established the unity of their states with the aid of this trend towards money transactions. After the Russian Empire was already unified, Ivan III gave sovereignty over parts of the country to his younger sons, but he retained for the central power the rights of coinage and the administration of justice. The area of loose trade relations outside political boundaries grows remarkably in extent and consistency once the stability of the official money makes it generally acceptable and thus enables it to draw all parts of the trading area into a closer relationship with the country in which it originates. The rate of exchange of the English sovereign gave considerable prestige to English trade in Portugal and Brazil and made the trade relations with these countries very close. In Germany, soon after the Carolingian period, the king granted the right of coinage to various individuals and religious establishments, but retained control over the alloy, quality and form of the coins. Before the 12th century, however, those who had such rights of coinage were allowed to determine for themselves the standard and form of coinage, and were thus able to make as much profit as they wished. The separation of coinage from the central power goes hand in hand with debasement of the currency. The essential function of money declines the less strongly it is guaranteed by the largest sociological group or its central organ. The reverse process illustrates the same point. The debasement of the currency brought about the dissolution and collapse of the largest group, on the unity of which it depended. A purely formal and symbolic relationship may also have contributed to these phenomena. It is one of the essential characteristics of gold and silver that they are relatively indestructible, and since the amount added by mining is insignificant, their total quantity remains almost stable over long periods of time. Whereas most other objects are used up, disappear, and are replaced in an unending process, money with its almost unlimited durability remains unaffected by this change of individual objects.